Rami Sherman lives in a kibbutz in northern Israel. 46 years ago, Rami was the operations officer of the Sayeret Matkal Commando unit in the IDF, the Israeli Defence Force, when the news filtered through that an Air France plane had been hijacked by Palestinian terrorists. The plane ended up in Entebbe, Uganda. Yitzhak Rabin and his defence minister, Shimon Peres, were fierce political rivals, and they spent a week disagreeing on strategy. Rabin wanted to give in to the terrorists' demands, the exchange of hostages for 40 Palestinian militants and a good deal of money. Peres thought that would encourage more terror. Rabin gave in and authorised the rescue after the terrorists extended their deadline from July the 1st until July the 4th, which gave Israel military chiefs enough time to come up with a viable plan. The operation was codenamed Operation Thunderbolt and subsequently renamed to Operation Yonatan. And the order came to the Sayeret Matkal Commando group and two other commando units that they were up for a top-secret mission. Rami speaks with Wilderness Conversations and recalls the scarcely credible events of July 4, 1976, when he and the elite forces of the IDF rescued 102 Jewish and Israeli hostages from capture in Entebbe, Uganda. Rami, welcome to Wilderness Conversations.
Thank you. It's honor and privilege for me to be now on this meeting.
Thanks, Rami. I'm really interested, before we get into the story of Entebbe, Rami, about your parents, who I believe made Aliyah to Israel, and yourself growing up in Israel through those, they were early days of a new state. What are some of your memories? And what's the story of your parents that set that up for you?
My parents' family settled in Poland from some decade. And during the big war, the Holocaust, most of my family from both sides were killed by the German, by the Nazi. Most of them. My mother's family, she left one faraway relative. My father survived because he was in a camp with 5 good friends and they support each other. And one of his sisters survived as well, Auschwitz. And she arrived later in 1952 to Melbourne, Australia. And she settled there because her husband told, I would like to be far away from war. So Melbourne, it's one of the farthest point in city.
So you have some relatives in Australia?
Yes. She died already. It's another story. And I have 2 cousins in Melbourne. And after the war, they arrived to Israel, my father and my mother. And somehow they tried to find a place where they can put their head. And without any connection, might be because of him, they found themselves on a bus to where the kibbutz, where I was born, Lehavot Bashan. And since they met on a bus, they've been living together till the last day on the earth. I was born in 1953 in a kibbutz, which settled till 6-day war, only 500 meters from the Syrian border. From the first day, I was in a children's house. On those days, the system where the kibbutz look after the child was separation between the parents and the children. Quite often, the Syrians shot it into the kibbutz, and we tried to escape over the wall or underground shelter. But the parents look at that as a normal thing, and no one ran to hide, and even the mother. I can't explain. It's something which is no explanation. I just tell that it's looked to me today, even though I remember those days as one of the happiest time in my life, I couldn't imagine myself put my children at the same system. It's something unusual.
It was just part of life for them.
Yes, it was a time when all the adults create a new state, and they create a very unique place called kibbutz, which was belonged to the communist ideology. And for them, that fulfilled all their life. And the children should take part on that. It's not concentrate on family way of living as most of the world focus on. And then at 72, I was 19 years old. I joined the army, and the atmosphere on that day was that I have to do as much as I could for saving the country. And it was nothing special, but that was the atmosphere. And I joined the most elite unit till today, Sayeret Matkal, the most important unit, very small unit, only 50 people, 60, something like that. And I grew up and became an officer. I don't know why. It happened. I don't know why. Nothing special, you know. And then...
Yeah, so some people would have done their service and then left, but you stayed on.
Yes. In 73, I took part in the Yom Kippur War, which was almost destroyed the country by Syria and Egypt.
Yeah.
And then 76, I found myself an operation commander of the unit under Yoni Netanyahu, Zichrono Lebracha, who was a commander of the unit. So I was very much involved in many aspects of the operation, in the preparation part, and then I was on the first Hercules who landed in Entebbe.
Well, before we get into the details, can I ask you about the events that led up to 1976? Where were you? And what was the feeling in Israel at the time when the news filtered out that these hostages were in Entebbe, in Uganda? Was there a uniform view on what the approach should be in Israel?
It's changed from the first day till Saturday when we flew over to Entebbe. It's the first 2 days, you know, okay, the news came that there is a Air France flight to hijacked as it took off from Eton. And we were on that time response on any terror attack in Israel. So we drove to Tel Aviv airport to wait. Might be they turn their face back to Tel Aviv airport. But then we realized that they landed in Libya, in Benghazi. And at the first 2 days, Israel didn't took it very serious. They thought it's a question of French government to response on the crisis. The only thing what they did, they sent one general to Paris to be involved with all the negotiation and the situation because we knew that there is a lot of Israeli on the plane. But that all, nothing special. I went down to Sinai Desert to do other activity for the security of the state. Just one example. Then Monday, Wednesday was the selection. And at that point, when Monday, the terrorists separated the non-Jews hostages and the Jews put on another room, it took more serious. But still at the first day, as the French government said immediately, we negotiate for releasing all the hostages, was still okay, something getting worse, but still the focus was on the French government active and not what we should do.
Right.
Then Wednesday, it was clear to us that the selection ended. The French government sent it to plan, and they took back to Paris the 140 hostages. And from that point, it was clear to Israel, we should take response. We are alone,
Right.
Nobody supported us, and we should decide. It was unclear what is the right way to move forward, but still we understood that on that 2 days, many Jews around the world, as well as in Israel, felt that the terrorists tried to put Israel on their knee, to put them down, and with the power of holding over 100 Jews hostages, mostly Israeli Jews, 4,000 kilometers from Israel, they can ask almost everything. So the atmosphere was very, very difficult. The emotion, reaction for that, mostly the Jews who live outside Israel, because many of them I met later in my journey, they told me, we ask ourselves, if that could happen when Israel can't do anything in Uganda, what would happen if they will do it in Buenos Aires or New York or Melbourne?
Mm.
And the Jews, in many cases, standing on the existence of the state of Israel as the important key of their daily life in a safe and secure. And it was
So the feeling was that the state of Israel needed to take responsibility for their own people.
Yeah, but it was unclear in what way.
Yeah, for sure.
Many, I can say here, it's I think it's good to say, many people told me they took Tehillim, the holy book, and tried to pray. Even though they were secular or atheists, they said, what we can do but pray for God. Help.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the atmosphere. Yep. The next stage was from Wednesday night, Thursday evening, till Saturday midday, when was military preparation.
The decision to operate military came later. Had you already started preparing though? Like had the military at your commando unit already said we need to look at solutions, or did that come later?
It came later. But, there is a Israeli mentality. Officer, there's nothing to do. And so they sat and discussed what we can do, but not in a formal way, nothing in a formal way.
Right.
It was, so a few idea came, and then Wednesday night was a government meeting, and the head of staff of the Israeli army was against military action. And the defense minister, Shimon Peres, pushed very strong for military action. And at the end, the prime minister, Yitzhak Rabin, announced on early Thursday morning that Israel accept all the...
So we would accept that they agreed they would accept the demands.
To release 53 terrorists, to pay $5 million ransom, but they put ultimatum, if they don't do it till Thursday noon, they will start to kill the hostages. So the first decision of the government was negotiation and not a military action.
In the background, at what point were you involved in, and when did you become aware that you were going to be involved in this military action?
We were back from Sinai Desert on Thursday, 5 o'clock. It was on our plan to be back. At 6 o'clock, we got an order to prepare a plan for releasing the hostages in the old terminal.
Right.
So from Thursday evening till Saturday noon, less than 2 days, everything prepared in plan.
So what sort of things happened during that preparation period? In those 2 days, what were you doing?
I was part of the 6th unit or 6th team from my unit. I was the commander of one of the team who prepared to fight with the hostages at the old terminal. My next duty was to coordinate the unit with the Air Force and other force who planned to be on the ground. So it was a mix of many things. One of the good things on these very intense days that everyone knew what he has to do in such a situation and work in many cases independently. Otherwise, it's impossible, to sit, discuss, take response, and then to ask other people to get the permission, and then everything is closed because it's night. No, the unit work in automatic way but in a good way, in automatic way. Everyone knew what he has to do.
Right. So everyone had specific tasks and it was clear what their roles were going to be.
And it was a very intense situation. In every hour or two was a change in the plan, was different idea of what we have to do. At the beginning, nobody believed that it could happen. Because we thought it's a crazy thing, to send 240 soldiers away from Israel. Nobody will sign for.
Yeah.
It looked too short to prepare such a plan. You need time to discuss all the difficulties that could happen on the route down to Entebbe. And we haven't got enough time for.
I saw and read somewhere, and I've watched there's a couple of movies and many, documentaries around about it. Is it true that in the Sinai there with you, they actually built a replica of pieces of the terminal so that you could practice?
We built something very, very, primitive, I can say, by Utah,
right.
By Utah fabric, with a few metal sticks we put on the ground. That's all, just to know more or less. We knew more or less how the whole looked like because we took from the Israeli building company who built this old terminal, we took the blueprint. But who knows, in 10 years, many things could change. So you never know if it's true or not. So we knew a bit from the information that we got from the hostages who were released to Paris. So we built something just to see how that looked like.
And during this period of preparation, were you preparing thinking that you'll probably never have to go, or were you preparing knowing that this was going to happen? Like, did you think it was going to happen or not?
I was personally thought nobody will take a decision to send us down. I thought personally that it's too short to say we are ready by preparation, not ready by emotion, by preparation. It's too short to send force down. So many things could happen on the way down on the ground, and it's impossible to think how. I'm sure I can say now, if we got another week for preparation, we will be much better, but the result will be nobody will send us down to Entebbe.
Yes, that's for sure.
That 100%, I'm sure about it.
So tell me about sort of the moment that you got the news that the operation was a go and that you had to gear up and get going.
We left Tel Aviv at 12:30. No, 1 o'clock. Saturday, 3rd of July. We landed in Sharm el-Sheikh, the most down south of Sinai Desert, at around 3 o'clock. And then we changed our uniform to Ugandan uniform, the 33 soldiers who were on the front. At that moment, I thought to myself, it's going to happen.
This is happening.
But we should remember, at that time, we haven't got a green light, which means the government decided to give us a right to land in Entebbe. But the feeling was, we are moving, we are going to cross enemy countries, and probably we will do it.
So tell me about getting on the planes. I think I read somewhere you were on the first Hercules. I think you might have mentioned that before. What was it like on that plane? What was the trip like? How long did it take and what was it like?
From the time we left till the time we land was about 8 hours and more. The first part from Tel Aviv to Sharm el-Sheikh, we flew only 30 meters above the ground in a very hot day, and quite a few vomited. It was very difficult to fly, very difficult. And I think today, when I look at that, people vomited, soldiers, because 3 reasons. First, it was a very difficult to fly condition. Second, because the days before was very intense and irregular time of eat and sleep. But the third, because was the body reaction for fear. People flew without knowing how that looked like Africa. No idea, Stephen. What does mean Africa, Entebbe, Uganda? No, it wasn't a Google map that you can see something, nothing. So people going to unclear situation in a very short time, in a very difficult flight condition, no chair. People sat standing on the wall of the plane, and very narrow path between the wall and the cars. No toilet. We ate only sandwiches. So it was a very difficult condition, a part of many things. No windows, no air conditioning. So you can imagine.
So you're on the Hercules with the cars. You were on the first one, which had the cars, which was the Mercedes and the two.
I was on the Jeep behind the Mercedes.
Right.
The first car was the Mercedes, which represent Idi Amin car.
Yep.
And then behind was 2 Land Rover Jeep, which represent the Idi Amin security force. So I was on the first car behind the Mercedes.
Tell us about, obviously you landed, it would have been dark. The car, backed out of the back of the aircraft?
Yes.
And then motored towards the terminal. Tell us how that all went down.
We landed with the airport with full of light.
Okay.
We were surprised, the Ugandan, who were on the new terminal. And they didn't realize that the Israeli could land in the middle of the night and come over. Only when the third Hercules prepared for landing, they shut off the light. As I went out, it was a big change from the atmosphere in a moment before the back door opened. It was quiet. Everywhere was green. Sky was full of stars and quiet and fresh air.
Mm.
And it was a dramatic change of being in the metal box 8 hours, and you go out for fresh air, for a beautiful night. It doesn't look like we are going to fight. I enjoy it. You know, sometimes you change your emotion from one aspect to one moment, and that was the first reaction of being out from the Hercules. I enjoyed, and it was like I fantasy myself. You know, I'm in the middle of Africa. It's a night in a beautiful place. Nothing could happen, and nothing is prepared for the few minutes ahead what happened of fighting.
The Jeep you were in and the Mercedes and the two Jeeps motored towards the old terminal.
Yes.
What started the events? What was the first things that happened that really kicked off the whole activity?
The first was about 250 meters from the terminal. Two Ugandan soldiers stood on the road and signed by hand to stop. And Yoni Netanyahu decided to open fire to hit them. One soldier spontaneously from the back jeep took his gun and opened loudly, tried to kill them. And this shooting awake me of understanding that I'm there not for enjoying the night in Africa, but I'm there for a purpose, for fighting.
Yeah.
But the second thought that awake immediately was it's going to be a catastrophe, because probably the terrorists and the Ugandan awake as well.
Mm.
We drove very quick to the terminal, and it was quiet. Nobody opened fire and nobody went out to see what happened, just quiet. But as we went out from the cars, very heavy fire opened from the terminal, which was next to from the tower, which located next to the terminal. And in the first second, Yoni Netanyahu was hit and fall down. But we prepared, we knew that the most important is the question, who is open fire first? Is it us or the terrorist? And each team ran to the door, which we prepare ourselves. My team duty was to be outside the building to see there is no force which coming from the back, and to try to stop the fire from the tower. But the most important to say about the Ugandan, most of them, apart soldiers on the tower, they were escape. Why they have to fight? What is the reason for fighting? So they escaped.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah.
It took about 5 minutes, Stephen, when 7 terrorists killed, when about 20 Ugandan soldiers killed. They were on the restroom on the second floor, and they were killed by another team. Unfortunately, 3 hostages killed during the clothing fire. And Yoni Netanyahu was on the ground, and other soldiers from paratroop brigade killed very seriously wounded during the fight in the new terminal.
Right.
That was a result of this fight. When the fire was a bit slow down, I took Yoni with the doctor and drove the 600 meter, the middle of the airport. Only the doctor, me and Yoni, we drove 600 meters to the plane where the doctor waited to try to save his life. Unfortunately.
Was that the same plane that you arrived on, or was that one of the subsequent Hercules?
The fourth one. I landed on the first.
The fourth one.
But the fourth, it was almost empty with the sixth doctor in. Right. And they prepared to take out from Entebbe all the hostages.
Yeah, okay. So I'm particularly interested in your recollection of Yonatan or Yoni Netanyahu. For those listening, may not know that, of course, he was the older brother of Benjamin Netanyahu, who became your longest-serving prime minister. A much-loved son of Israel.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about him. Did you know him, and what sort of person was he?
The first time I met him was in the 73 war. He was the commander of my unit in the Golan Heights when we fought against the Syrian. And he was very brave man. Mm. But at the same time, he always asked if we got some mission. Is it the right mission? If it could cost life of soldiers, so maybe we should change. The death of soldier was in a very high position of his decision. Even he was brave and he always moved forward to be in the front, but the cost of living was very important point on his calculation. So that's the first time I met him. The second time I worked with him for 1 year. He was a commander of the unit, I was operation commander. And we worked together in very intimate relation, very intense. And the most important I can say about him that not very often you can see a commander in any army, as well as in Israeli army, in IDF, which in his side bag, there is always book.
Yeah.
But not book about, what he has to do, diary or something, but a reading book, a military philosophy or poem, always was a book in his side bag. And that was very special for and represent for me his personality. He was a very intellectual person. He always thought about the next stage. Today, when people ask me, I say, I don't know if he would alive, if he would move forward in the army service, or might be he would left the army and joined the university in Israel, either in the state, I don't know. But these two things was one of his loves, study and serving the country.
And he was very much loved by the country, wasn't he? Because he was a hero from the 1973 war as well.
Yes.
And so known by everyone. And so when he, being the only fatality of the Israeli troops, there would have been a great outpouring of sorrow in Israel. So when you did get back, I think he was buried a few days later.
The funeral was 2 days after we landed in Israel. We landed on Sunday, and Tuesday was the funeral in Herzl Mountain in Jerusalem.
What was that like?
Honestly, Stephen, I can't explain everything, but 24 hours after we landed, I was occupied in a new mission. So it was okay, there is a funeral, we have to be there, but my head was on a new mission for the security of the state.
Yeah, so life went on.
Yes, life moved on. the country, the world, the Jewish world was exciting and celebrated. And we were in our unit, occupied immediately as we landed on a very huge and important mission for the security of the state. And it took us in a good way and a bad way. It depends how you look at it.
Yeah.
For moving forward. We did our job, and now we move to another one. That was the feeling. And people ask me, but it was so exciting around the world. Where you were? I wake up in the morning and prepare for next.
You're on to the next job while the nation celebrated.
That's right. Exactly.
And commiserated the death of Yoni.
That's right. Yeah. So he is with me, but it wasn't something very emotion. Wasn't time to understand deeply that. And maybe that is my biography. I was born in 1953. Maybe not too much emotion was part of my life. Probably many Israelis feel something or understand this. They feel something similar.
Yeah. When you reflect on the raid in Entebbe, what did you learn from it? What did you take away from it when you look back on that?
I would like to say only one thing. There is a few other things. Maybe we'll talk in another time, what we can take. But I would like to say, in such a short time of preparation, such a big mission, with so many possibility of collapse, of catastrophe, the most busy one on the operation was him. It's impossible to explain how we succeeded without, if you don't believe on him, you say, it was a good luck, which is okay. It's just another way to express.
Yeah.
And if you believe on him, so you can say the most busy one was him. That is the most important. Otherwise, you can't explain how that run from the first second till we landed back in Israel in such a success.
I'm interested that you say that you've had a long, wonderful life in Israel. Can you look back over those years and see God's hand throughout many events through Israel's history?
I am personally moved and see that not always understand what he would like from me personally, myself, and the country. I can't explain easily everything in his behavior. I can't give answers as many Orthodox Jews, they said, the Holocaust is his hand for teach us something. I can't. I am not in such a developed myself to say in everything. In many cases, I know that there is something which the way to explain is by understand there is something happened in a situation which I can't explain. And in many cases, I can't explain. And I took it as is and to explain things in Israel, in my life personally, to take it as a good friend which walk with me in every day. And as a good friend, you can take an advice, and sometimes he give his word. So as long as I feel him next to me, I know I have a good friend.
Well, I think the establishment of the State of Israel, the return of the Jewish people to the land was a miracle.
Yes.
And I think the fact that they're still there and have survived so many difficulties is a miracle that is ongoing.
No doubt about it. No doubt.
Rami, thanks very much for joining Wilderness Conversations.
Thank you so much.